a singing plant, a daring hero, a sweet girl, and a demented dentist. Yeah, that pretty much sums up this movie. Little Shop of Horrors. How do you categorize this movie? It's a musical, spoof, comedy, horror movie that's a remake of a 1960 Roger Corman movie of the same name, a movie which is one of the cheapest films ever produced. And it only follows the plot of that movie loosely. This movie actually takes more inspiration from something like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, The Day of the Triffids, The Blob, and with the doo-wop musical style of Grease. It's a bizarre movie. But for me, what makes it enjoyable is that it's such a send-up to old Cold War-era monster movies like The Blob and Day of the Triffids. Oh, and before this was a movie, it was actually a musical written by Howard Ashman and composed by Alan Menken, who you may recognize as the duo responsible for creating the sound of the Disney Renaissance. But before they worked for Disney, they were up in New York and made this very successful musical, Little Shop of Horrors. And a few years later, it was turned into a movie directed by the Muppet Man himself. No, the other one, Frank Oz. So let's dive right into this movie. So the first characters we meet are actually not characters, really, it's the Greek chorus. And if you don't know what a Greek chorus is, it's this old theater technique created by the Greeks. And it's this group of people that would either sing or narrate what's going on in the play to give some context to everything, and really exist as outside observers or guides so that the audience isn't lost as to what's going on. So first we meet the Greek chorus of this movie, and it's comprised of these three women who sing the opening number, Little Shop of Horrors. And very quickly we're introduced to Skid Row and our two main characters, Seymour and Audrey. Now, Seymour is played by Rick Moranis, and he is this wimpy Rick Moranis type who just loves flowers, who has a huge crush on Audrey, but he doesn't have the self-confidence to ask her out. But Seymour's got this idea to help the plant shop get more business, and that's this weird little plant that he's found. And this plant is some kind of Venus flytrap. Nobody knows where it came from. And as soon as he puts it out on the front window, customers just start pouring in.
Excuse me. I couldn't help noticing that strange and interesting plant. What is it?
It's an Audrey, too.
I've never seen anything like it before.
No one has.
Where did you get it?
And if you think that's a little far-fetched or exaggerated, welcome to the movie. Nothing in this movie is subtle or takes its time. This is a very fast-paced, exaggerated, live-action cartoon of a movie. Everything is turned up to 11. The way people dress, the way people act, nothing's realistic, it's a cartoon, and we're just along for the ride. And that leads me to Audrey. Now, Audrey is one of the biggest caricatures of this movie because she's supposed to be this desirable girl that the men are fighting over, and she's really not that attractive. At least, I don't see it, and I think that's intentional. I mean, just listen to her voice.
Mama was poor. I meet a man and I follow him blindly. He'd snap his fingers at me. I'd stay sure.
She's not exactly your typical ingenue leading lady, you know, like Cosette or Christine. But her issue is that she's in this incredibly abusive relationship with a dentist played by Steve Martin, who is one of the more enjoyable characters of this movie because he's also such a cartoon, and he also gets one of the better songs. I mean, just look at how into it he gets.
'Cause I'm a dentist and a sex sale.
That cracks me up every time. So yeah, back to the plot of this story. The plant is definitely good for business and it's working, but in order for it to live, it needs to constantly be drinking blood. And Seymour's only got 10 fingers to feed it with. So naturally, Seymour takes the next logical step, go to a butcher and deliver some raw meat for it. Oh wait, no, that would be in a realistic movie. Now, this movie, they just start murdering people. So around this time, the plant has actually grown to a pretty good size, you know, about 5 or 6 feet tall. And now it talks, and not only talks, but it sings and it swears and it talks Seymour into murdering the dentist. Because, I mean, yeah, the dentist, he is a sadist, and it's very clear in both his song and the couple scenes that we see in his office. And he abuses Audrey all the time. So, I mean, it wouldn't be that worse off if he were gone. But still, that's one heck of a leap. But because this movie is a horror movie after all, he ends up feeding Steve Martin to the plant. It grows even bigger. But Seymour's boss, Mr. Mushnick, he catches him and calls him out on it, only for Mushnick to also get fed to the plant. And this is the part of the movie where Seymour's getting everything he wanted. He's got this secret with how he's feeding the plant, but he's getting money, he's getting merchandising deals, he's got Audrey, and he's got the flower shop. And business is good. And you can see that when Howard Ashman was working on Aladdin, he definitely took Aladdin's dependence on the genie and his need to keep the genie a secret from this movie. Seymour and Aladdin have a lot in common in this respect. They both have a supernatural being that they're keeping a secret, who is more or less responsible for their success. But of course, this secret can't be kept forever. Audrey finds out, and the plant tries to eat her. Or does he? Now, many of you may already know this, but this movie actually has two different endings, and they are both wildly different in both tone and purpose. But first, let me tell you about my personal history with this movie, because when I saw it, I didn't know this. I didn't know there were two endings. So the first time I saw this movie, it was on some streaming service like Netflix or something, and I watched it and I saw the good ending, the happy ending. And I'll talk about that first. So in this ending, the plant tries to eat Audrey, but Seymour recovers her, pulls her out of its mouth. So then they're outside trying to recover from the trauma that just happened. And then there's a salesman that comes up to them, played by Jim Belushi, and he wants to sell hundreds and thousands of little baby Audrey 2 plants to every household in America. And Seymour and Audrey, realizing that this plant is a monster, they yell at him, they tell him to go away, there's no merchandising deal. And then Seymour goes back in to kill the plant. The plant just tears down the shop on top of both of them. And then Seymour climbs out of the rubble looking a little worse for wear, and then takes a severed electrical wire and electrocutes the plant, blowing him up and ending this whole affair. And then the movie wraps up pretty quick. Audrey and Seymour kiss, and then it dissolves to this house in the suburbs that is exactly what Audrey always wanted. They're married now, they've got a life together, but then there's this little plant in their garden that looks an awfully lot like the Audrey 2 plant from the beginning. Of course, implying that this affair isn't really over. The plant's still alive, and this whole invasion may happen again. So while it is still a happy ending, there's still a little bit of uncertainty there with the little plant. And it's a fine ending, it's a good way to wrap it up, and that is the official ending of the movie. If you watch it on DVD or any regular streaming service, you'll get that ending. But the second time I watched this movie, it wasn't on Netflix, it wasn't on any streaming service I could find. I don't even remember how I came across it. And I watched it again because I love the movie, I love the music, and I wanted to see it again. So I watched it, and the ending was so much different from what I remembered. So much so that I thought I misremembered what happened at the end of the first time I watched it. That I may have just hallucinated the ending, because this ending is so much darker, and I kind of like it better. So here's what happened. It's the same climax, except Audrey does get eaten. Seymour isn't able to save her. She's dead. The plant got her. And then they have the Mean Green Mother number where it goes exactly the same way. The plant shop falls in on itself. Seymour's buried. He comes out of the rubble. But then the plant wraps him up in his vines and very slowly eats him. And he dies. So now our two leads are dead. The only other entertaining characters, Mr. Mushnick and Steve Martin's dentist, are long dead. They were eaten several scenes ago. So where do we go now? Everybody's dead. Well, it cuts back to the Greek chorus, basically giving an epilogue and an ending about what has happened since that night. And apparently the plant has been able to merchandise itself. And exactly as Jim Belushi proposed, there's an Audrey 2 in every household in America, and they're getting fed blood, and they're growing, and they're wreaking havoc. And then it cuts to this montage of these massive Audrey 2s looking like something out of the Day of the Triffids, flipping cars, eating people, destroying the trains, just running rampant through New York. I guess it took some inspiration from King Kong as well. And this ending has so much money and effects thrown into it, it looks great. And it ends with a few of them scaling the Statue of Liberty, and where it says "the end" with a question mark, exclamation point, question mark. And then the last shot is actually a fourth wall break where the screen of the movie theater is broken by one of these Audrey 2 plants laughing. And that's the end. Now in the theater, this would have been much more successful because you're actually in the theater with a screen, so that when the plant bursts through the screen on film, it looks more convincing. But it's still a fantastic ending. It's super dark and depressing because humanity's doomed and the plants are winning, and it's really a downer ending. So I can see why they swapped it out with a happier ending. And if you're looking at this movie as a musical, it does make more sense to have the happy ending, But if you're looking at this as a send-up to classic monster movies, the dark ending actually makes more sense and is more fitting. And for me, I'm a sucker for good practical effects, like the puppetry used to bring Audrey 2 to life, and this sad ending has such great effects and so many creative ways to use the plants that I can't help but want that ending to be the real one. So yeah, that's Little Shop of Horrors. One of the strangest movies that I've ever seen, but also one of the most fun. You can't take it too seriously. It's a send-up to classic monster movies, and in some ways it's a direct parody of monster movies. Again, everything's exaggerated. All the cliches of a monster movie are there, but they're cranked up to 11. I've referred to it as a cartoon a few times in this video, and it feels like a live-action monster movie cartoon. And it's got an incredibly catchy soundtrack. Again, these are the people that defined an era of Disney animation with their music, and this soundtrack is up to par with that. So if any of that sounds appealing to you, give it a watch. It's available on HBO Max, the new HBO streaming service. But also you can watch the 2 different endings right here on YouTube. And I want you to comment below, which ending do you prefer to this movie? The happy ending or the sad ending? I'm really curious to see where people stand. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more content, and hit the notification bell to be notified every time I upload a video. And as always, I'm Colby. This is my nerdy talk, and I'll see you in the next video.